Our next segment is special guest Rich Vreeland, or AKA Disasterpeace. He is an audio guy extraordinaire. I think audio guy is probably underselling it. He's a composer. He develops his own tools. He developing his own games. And has done quite a bit with a bunch of developers, specifically in the indie space. Hey, Rich, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I think I partially
Good.
botched your introduction. So, do you want to give yourself your own introduction a little bit and tell us what you're up to?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Rich Vreeland. I've been making music and sound primarily for games, but also for movies and occasionally other mediums for the last 15 some odd years, maybe longer. And yeah, worked on lots of independent games like Fez and Hyper Light Drifter, Mini Metro, Mini Motorways, Reigns. And lately, I'm wrapping up a big game project with Heart Machine called Solar Ash, and I'm starting a new game project, a much smaller project called Paradise Marsh. I have some sort of under the radar things coming out. Soon I have a film coming out, things like that, and I'm also getting into some music software projects. So that's kind of where my head is at these days.
You're a busy person. That's for certain.
You could say that,
Yeah.
yeah. I always have at least a couple projects brewing.
And you manage to get like great projects every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a vacuum, that's for sure. It's sort of like we've been fortunate to work on some really great projects, and that turned out well, and I think those sort of things sort of piggybacked into other things. So I'm definitely very fortunate in that way.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the questions I had for you sort of dwells on like your style of music, which I'd
Okay.
say is really excellent at setting a mood and ambient a tone for games.
Mhm.
How did you develop that style, and how has it evolved as you've gone from really like smaller or not smaller games, but like more publisher,
Traditional.
yeah, traditional publisher, big publisher games to indie space, then from film and etc.
Yeah, it's interesting because where I started was very much creating like prog rock influenced music, lots of chip tunes,
Yeah.
played a lot of guitar, so a lot of riffs, things like that. But I also got into concept album. I got into concept albums pretty early, both like as a listener, but more so actually as a creator. Was really inspired by the idea of making concept albums, and so a handful of my earliest albums are all concept albums, and that sort of got me to start thinking in a certain way, a certain mindset about world building
Yeah.
that I think helped me kind of to pivot from just writing original material to taking commissions and working on soundtracks.
What is a con or a what was it that you said? The concept album?
Yeah, the idea behind a concept album is essentially an album of music that has some sort of through line narrative that's
Hmm.
generally a little bit more explicit than maybe in a traditional album. There are a lot of albums from the 60s and 70s and even 80s that were very like, might have like a fantasy setting or sci-fi setting or something like that. That's sort of like the tropey uh, sort of example of a concept album. But people continue to make concept albums about all different sorts of things, and it's just about creating like a narrative through line, and doing world building, having characters, kind of like making an opera or a story, of like on stage or something, but with music. So I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that does actually seem like it would be a really excellent fit for like game soundtrack, because you're effectively doing the same thing. I mean, you have leitmotif for certain characters, of course,
Yeah.
and you have Yeah, and areas, right, and parts of the world that come in and get their own voice. Is that one of the things that attracted you to game composition and development, I guess?
I think, I was always an avid player of games since I was little, and so the idea that I could work on games was really fascinating to me, because it was it was always this sort of like other kind of element in my life, something that was like kind of magical and strange, and made me think a lot about like what must it be like in Japan, because of all these games I was playing. So there's definitely a lot of curiosity that kind of went into that, but also there was serendipity. Just the way that I started working on games was really strange. I had been posting music online and on a message board for something totally unrelated, and kind of stumbled into an opportunity to write music and sound effects for a pre-smartphone era mobile phone.
Oh boy.
And that's kind of how I started. And I did a couple of those projects. They didn't turn out super great.
Sure.
I think in some cases they didn't even use they just shipped the game with no sound at all. It was kind of strange, but I mean, for me, I got paid, and it was an interesting experience as like a young person to realize, oh wow, I can make a living doing this. And it was only, I think, over time that, which just kind of naturally fell into the idea of putting myself in new kind of sonic spaces, and getting some sort of like pitch or like a some sort of prompt that oh, this project calls for this kind of music, or this this sort of setting. And I was just so voraciously ready to learn and to grow and like experiment creatively with music that it was all it was a great fit for me.